One of the most powerful interpersonal techniques I've developed is called the disarming technique. And it's where when you find the truth in a criticism that seems incredibly unfair, exaggerated, or just plain wrong. And it's based on this remarkable thing called the law of opposites. And the law of opposites says that if you defend yourself against a harsh, unfair criticism, which you do and we all do, it's automatic, it's knee-jerk, it's almost impossible not to get defensive when people come at you with things that just seem unfair. But if you give in and you defend yourself, your defense will prove that the critic is right. In other words, if you defend against a false criticism, you'll prove it's right. And the other side, that's a paradox. On the other side, and I'll illustrate it because I'll take it out of this philosophical realm into the harsh, practical reality of real life. But the other side of the paradox is if you genuinely agree with a criticism that seems preposterous, untrue, unfair, exaggerated, or just plain wrong, and you suddenly see the truth in it, and you genuinely agree with it, the critic will instantly conclude that they were wrong. So, in essence, defend yourself from a false criticism, you'll prove the criticism is right. Agree with a harsh, unfair, illogical, untrue criticism, and the critic will stop believing the criticism. Now, how could that possibly be? Well, I'll give you an example. Would you like to hear about the worst criticism I ever received from a patient? This was harsh, but I was treating a woman who had had a very troubled childhood and a troubled adolescence. And she had been, depressed and angry for a good 10 years with a failed therapy when she came to me. And she was pretty fragile. And for whatever reason, I decided to see her with her husband because she would feel greater support that way. And she was, let me say, somewhat critical and demanding, which I don't mean that in a disparaging way, because we all get that way sometimes. But she was very, very challenging to work with and was very critical of everyone around her. Things were always someone else's fault. And I don't think I've ever worked harder for a patient and put more effort and heart into it than with her. And one day during a session, she looked up to me and said, Dr. Burns, I just want you to know that this therapy that you've been doing is worse than the incest I endured as a child growing up. And I could not believe my ears, and I felt ashamed, but kind of enraged too. And you think, oh, therapists aren't supposed to have emotions. Well, I'll tell you, we do. We're human beings. And I had been giving so much to this woman, and now she says something like that, and it just seemed incredibly unfair. And I told myself, well, use your 5 secrets of effective communication, David. Remember the disarming technique. Find some truth in that. I just decided not to say anything because I knew I was going to botch it if I said anything. And we kind of made it to the end of the session. But that weekend, I was jogging around Haverford College, which I used to do with a colleague, Tony Bates, and we would talk about our toughest cases, patients with borderline personality disorder and that type of thing, and see if we could help each other get unstuck. But he couldn't come this day, so I did the 4-mile jog alone, and I was trying to give myself advice. I said, David, you have to agree with her. Use the disarming technique. Remember the law of opposites. And then I would say out loud, I can't agree with her because it wasn't true, what she's saying. How can you agree with something that's untrue? And then I would say to myself, well, David, you're just like your patient. You're whining and complaining. You've got to find what is the truth in what she's saying. And I said, how can that be true? I've given to her, and she blames everybody. Blame. Everything is someone else's fault, and she never is accountable. She never looks at her own role in anything. And I said, well, David, you're not going to get anywhere with defending yourself. you've got to find the truth in what she's saying. And I jogged about 3.25 miles. I was near the end of the second lap. And then it hit me like lightning, what the truth and what she'd been saying. And I saw it and I said, that's what she meant. That's what's going on. I think that's what she meant. And I got so excited to see her. And when I saw her the next week, I said, we'll call her Marlene, or just to make up a name to protect her identity. But I said, Marlene, last week you told me that the therapy I've been offering is worse than the incest that you endured growing up. And I felt so hurt and really angry when you said that, because I'm not aware of any patient I've ever had who I've worked harder for. And it seemed unfair and unjust. And on the weekend, I was jogging and asking myself, what did you mean? Is there some truth in that? And then it hit me like lightning. And I want to tell you what I thought, and you can tell me if it's true or close to the truth. But I think what you're saying is that I've been using all of these techniques in cognitive therapy to help you develop self-esteem and to challenge your negative thoughts and that type of thing, giving you homework assignments. And I think you've been telling me I've been missing the boat because I haven't been dealing with your feelings. I haven't been touching you at the heart. I haven't been connecting with you. So it seems just like when you were growing up, here I'm manipulating you for my purposes rather than hearing your pain and being there for you. And I can imagine how hurtful that has seemed to you, and how alone and rejected you feel, and how disappointed and angry and maybe just devastated that the same thing happening once again in your life. And I've just wanted to know if that makes any sense to you. And notice now what I'm doing, rather than defending myself, which was my human urge, is telling her, you're right. I have been failing you in an enormous and tragic way. And when I said that, she burst into tears and started sobbing uncontrollably. And we made a connection that we'd never made before. And then she began to work really hard for the first time in therapy, and she really turned things around for herself. But that's called the disarming technique, or the law of opposites, and it can't be used as a gimmick. It has to come from the heart. And the moment, and it involves the great death of the self. The therapist, to do good therapy, the therapist has to endure the great death, just as the patient often has to endure the great death of the self to find enlightenment, to overcome depression and loss of self-esteem. But therapists have to grow too. And the moment I agreed with her that I had failed her, suddenly my failure was her first success, her first taste of intimacy, because she's been blaming everybody. Everyone gets defensive, and the closeness she's experienced just was zero. And the moment I opened up and made myself vulnerable, bang, the connection happened, and then we could use powerful techniques to help her. So that's just an example of the disarming technique. It's one of 5 interpersonal techniques that I use and teach. And if you're interested in it, we're going to have a lot more on the 5 secrets of effective communication. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out our app or go to feelinggreat.com if you'd like to learn to change the way you think and feel, or learn to improve your relationships with loved ones and the people you care about, or even the people you don't care about. We'll have a tremendous number of tools for you to learn and grow. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little hard for me to, talk about my failures, but I found that being human is a lot more wonderful life than trying to be perfect. Okay, bye-bye. Love you all.